So in Thor Ragnarok, there are a lot of nods for Australian and New Zealanders in there. Things like the Aboriginal flag colours were painted on one of the spaceships.
Yep.
Did you try and do anything similar for Thor Love and Thunder?
Specifically in this film, I mean, just from home, from New Zealand, we've got a Māori god in there. I've got, like a few Māori references, sort of dispersed throughout. But one of the coolest things we've got is this big cloak that Thor was wearing at the beginning of the film when he's meditating under the tree and he's about to do this battle. The whole thing was designed by Otis Hope Carey, who's really a fantastic Aboriginal artist, and we worked with him and said, it's like, this is the kind of design of the cloak. What do you want to do on top of that? But if you know his work, it's very distinctive and it's very obviously his designs.
Can you talk specifically to working with, the three directors' attachments, Bjorn Stewart, John Bell, and Jack Steele?
I never got the opportunity to go and just shadow someone or just sit around while people were directing. And, I've always, even now, like with my friends who are directors, I really loved going to see them work because I always learn something and I, always say yes whenever someone else wants to come. So to give those opportunities to up-and-coming native filmmakers is pretty cool. It's cool to have them around as well because, Māori and Aborigines, we've got a real kinship and, we feel very similar and, we're always the ones who kind of get drawn to each other at the party. So, just to have, have a brother or sister with me not hanging out on the set was awesome.
You did a Welcome to Country on Thor Ragnarok, but that was also something that you did with Love and Thunder. Is that just something, going forward that anything filmed in Australia, it's something you would do?
Yeah, and I think it's something that anyone should do. It doesn't have to be me. I really encourage it. In the States as well. There's not one part of America that has not been lived on by an Indigenous person and who can still lay claim to that area being theirs. So, if you're in the middle of somewhere in the middle of America, it's up to you to find out whose land that is, and just it's also a gesture of like acknowledgement and saying, we acknowledge that this is your land and that we thank you for just letting us be here and we'll try and leave only footprints, even though it's 2022 and it's Hollywood.
When you see your films, you make these enormous studio movies, but they still have the kind of style and voice that you can see if you watch something like Boy. And so what kind of advice would you have for any directors that dream of making indie movies as well as making, big studio movies?
I think my main advice would be just stick to your voice, stick to your own voice and vision, because it's easy to be tempted and distracted by other people who say, you should do it like this. Oh, you don't do that, it's a big mistake, do it like this. And I learned very early on, because there was a few voices, especially from older filmmakers and older editors or DPs, or just people who I think, meant well, but were telling me that the way that I had in my head was wrong. And I now know, I've learned, only a couple of years later, that there was a perfectly legitimate way of telling a story of what I had in my head, and then I stuck with that, and that's what I've been doing since. And so it's just a bit of self-belief really, and the ability to say that there's thousands of ways of telling a story and with film, and just because someone doesn't really get the way that you want to do it doesn't mean that it's wrong.
Because I have something worth fighting for.